Hi, everybody. So today's lesson is going to be for Wednesday, April 15th. You have a bell ringer today. It is posted on the live agenda. It's from the stuff that we did before break. So you will have to look back in your notes for that. Some executive orders and stuff. And vocab. So go back in your notes to look to help you on the bell ringer for today. Before we get started on the slides, today we're doing slides 11 and 12. Both of them are writing slides. So far, we have talked about, the Iron Curtain split between democracy and capitalism and communist dictatorships. And let's see, we've talked about Berlin being cut up. We have East Germany and West Germany. And then in East Germany, controlled by the Soviets, Berlin is there, and it is broken up between West Berlin and East Berlin. We have the Berlin airlift for the Allies coming in and trying to help the people that live there. Joseph Stalin is very upset because he's not getting his way. He wants to institute communism and spread his communist beliefs, catching the cold of communism, which some of you put in your anti-spy propaganda posters, which I have loved looking at. So if you haven't done that, please turn those in. So he's very upset, and as a response, because we're getting scared of Joseph Stalin and the fact that he's very upset, we create NATO, and NATO is very, very, very important for us. I mean, we still have it today. It is a ginormous alliance, and it says if one nation in the alliance gets attacked, then all of them are going to war. It's very powerful, and it's very good that we're still part of NATO. Soldiers returning home. This is huge because we learned after World War I that we can't just plop them back into everyday society. They need some sort of transition. They need help because they just experienced something horrible and traumatic, and they need guidance and support. So we're going to do that. Before Franklin Roosevelt passed away, he actually signed the Servicemen's Readjustment Act, or the GI Bill, which GI stands for government issue, to help transition our soldiers back to everyday normal life. All right, so slides 11 and 12. Remember, the numbers are what you see on the actual document or on the slides presentation. I don't know what number this is for you guys writing, but we're doing 11 and 12 today. The title is Politics and Human Rights. You have two vocab words. It is fair deal and Universal Declaration of Human Rights. So Harry Truman is president. Franklin Roosevelt has passed away. Harry Truman was his vice president. And then in the 1948 election, Truman runs for president and he wins. So he wants to create a plan for the country moving forward. We all know that we are fighting communism and trying to stop the spread of communism. So Truman comes up with a plan. And to honor the New Deal, his plan is called the Fair Deal. And this was plans for supporting the country just as much as we're supporting other countries and trying to stop the spread of communism. So we're coming up with a health insurance plan, funding for education, and unfortunately, some of those plans aren't going to take place. He's going to have some pushback, just like FDR had pushback with the New Deal programs. Some people are going to think that this is overstepping from the federal government. There are people that are going to disagree. And Truman, who is a Democrat, he had a Republican Congress and he couldn't get a lot of these things passed. But, we're supporting other countries and trying to stop them from falling to communism when we need to also work on home and, pushing for education and taking care of mental health and physical health and all that stuff for the people that are, they fought on the home front, and our soldiers definitely need some physical or mental health care as well. So, oh man, I was gonna say something. Totally, wow, I just lost that. Truman, Fair Deal. Oh, got it. Okay. So when we start talking more about space, there is going to be something called Sputnik, which I had pictures of it on my little cupboard next to the things to be absolutely terrified of list. The Russians, Soviets, are going to beat us in space for a little bit. And the reason why Harry Truman wants to push for education in his Fair Deal is because he wants to push for math and science. And we're going to talk about this again when we talk about space. But he wants us to really push math classes and science classes. He wants more scientists and he wants more mathematicians, right? Because we can't lose to the Soviets. We don't want to lose in an arms race that we're competing with them. So we need people to manufacture weapons and atomic weapons more specifically. And we also need to have scientists to win in this race against the Soviets in space as well. So we have an arms race and a space race, which we'll talk about. But he's really pushing for education. Actually, and I'll say this again, we have the education system that we have today because of Sputnik. Once we we're like, oh God, the Soviets are really smart in space stuff, we are pushing for science and math in the United States. So that's kind of why those classes are super important today even. But history is important too. All right, Harry Truman. Don't forget social studies. It's because of Sputnik. So anyway, so let's keep going. So we have the United Nations. This should sound familiar because after World War I, we have the League of Nations, and that was that world government to prevent any war for like World War I from ever happening again. And it failed because the United States didn't join, because Congress didn't want us to get involved in other people's affairs, which, sorry, we're going to, because we're the United States and we have the resources to do that. So after World War II, the United Nations is formed. 50 nations meet in California. I believe it was San Francisco. And this is in 1945, and they create the United Nations Charter, which is kind of like a little constitution. And they basically create an agreement and goals for the United Nations. What do we want to do as a world government? How can we make the world a better place? Do we want to focus on poverty? On disease? Do we want to focus on education, on equality? What do we want to focus on? And actually every 10 years the UN meets and they create goals for what they want to focus on. So these countries that are part of the United Nations work on basically making the world a better place. And I know that sounds cheesy, but that's their genuine goal. And they also need to come together before like war is declared on anybody. Let's talk about this first. Of course, if they're attacked and they're part of NATO, then everyone goes to war. But let's talk about this. Let's be diplomatic, diplomacy. Let's do that first before we just attack countries. Eleanor Roosevelt, when Franklin Roosevelt passed away, she had made a comment like, my time in public is over, but no, it was not. So she actually gets pulled to join the United Nations, and she is part of the United Nations Commissions on Human Rights. When we talked about Eleanor Roosevelt, I think we had like 1 or 2 slides on her. She fought for equal rights. She fought for equal rights for African Americans. She fought for equal rights for women. Equal treatment for all people. The woman was a true hero. She presented and helped write, your second vocab word is the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. This is goals for all the member countries in the United Nations, basically saying, this is how you treat people. If your country isn't doing these things, if your country isn't treating people in your land this way, then you have a human rights violation. And there are today, we use this Declaration of Human Rights to say, okay, this country is breaking X, Y, and Z. So you have a human rights violation. If your country is committing a genocide against a group of people, granted most of the time those countries that are committing a genocide aren't in the United Nations anyway. So there's that. If your country is doing this or attacking your people or refusing food to the X, Y, and Z, whatever it is, this is a human rights violation. If you are not allowing a certain group of people, let's say like women or something, not to vote, that's a human rights violation. You're preventing them from their right to do this, okay? So the United Nations would get involved if that country is included in the United Nations. The United Nations doesn't have a military. They have what's called a peacekeeping force, and they can go with, like, if you've ever seen the Hunger Games, those peacekeepers, they would like go in, but they don't have weapons, and they would be like, hey, can you listen to the United Nations? I mean, there's no like actual army for the United Nations. So there's that. You just have to do some convincing and some talking, which is diplomacy. The last thing on how to build a better world, the World Bank is created, and that is to help poor countries build up their economy after World War II. The World Bank, just like the World Health Organization, are actually playing a big part in what's going on today with the pandemic, because obviously every country's economy is going to tank because we can't buy things, or not as much things as we would in the past, and the World Health Organization is obviously getting involved because they are in charge of the world's health. So that's really important, so we can just regulate everybody's economy and make sure that we're all doing good. So make a summary for that. Next up, communism grows. This is absolutely terrifying. So people are going to be really scared because, number one, we have discovered that the Soviets have an atomic weapon. We fly over their airspace and some of their water space, and we had sensed that with technology that there is some radioactivity in this area, which means they have just tested a atomic bomb. Yikes, this is not good. We don't want them to have an atomic bomb. So that's one reason why we're scared. Number two, the communists have gained control of China, which was the most populous country in the world. There had been a civil war in China for years. And after World War II, the communists had taken over China. So there's two people involved here. Chiang Kai-shek was the United States supported leader. The man wasn't the best, but he wasn't communist, so that's why we supported him. And so it was Chiang Kai-shek against a man named Mao Zedong. And Mao Zedong was the communist leader, and he has been trying to take over China and institute communism for years. After World War II, he does. So now the Soviets have an atomic weapon, and they have taken over China. China is a communist country. It is still a communist country. They have a president or dictator. If you'll notice anything that's happening with the coronavirus in China and how they've been able to slow the spread and flatten the curve like we're all trying to do here, social distancing, it's because they can totally lock down their country. They have a dictator. So it's one thing for Mike DeWine, our governor, to say, hey, everybody, stay inside, and we do the best we can to stay inside. But I mean, I don't know what my neighbor's doing. Like, they could still be going out like normal or having people over, right? So in China, because they have a dictatorship, communist dictatorship, they can be like, you're on a lockdown and you will not go outside. And they're like, oh God, like, okay, I don't want to die, right? So it's just different circumstances for sure. So communism is spreading and Harry Truman is getting nervous. The country is getting nervous. And so he starts to build up our military. We'll look at the bottom here. NATO members. We have, I'm going to read it off, 345,432,000 people, and the communists in the world, 841,795,000. Look at those numbers. So we have NATO versus the communists. Communism is spreading. And if you are the United States and you're looking at this and you're trying to, have the Marshall Plan, the Truman Doctrine, you're trying to stop this spread of communism, that is scary for us. On top of that, they have a nuclear weapon. So Chiang Kai-shek is out of there. Mao Zedong is now the leader of China. He institutes communism. We're getting scared. Okay, so please don't forget to do a summary for both of those slides. Make sure you have the vocab words from the last slide. I think that is it. All right, that is it, guys. So I will see you guys tomorrow. I'll talk to you guys and look at the discussion board. If you have any questions, please let me know. If you have not turned in the poster, please do that. Bell ringer, summary statements for both slides, vocab words. That is it. See you guys tomorrow.